Hey everyone, Cleo here, and today I'm here with a review for The Book of Night by Holly Black. So The Book of Night is Holly Black's adult debut. I have not read a Holly Black before. I did not go into this with much knowledge. I had not actually looked up the premise. Maybe I knew the premise, but it just fully escaped me. The only thing that I really knew going into it is that it would have some sort of a shadow magic system. And so the shadow magic to me is definitely the most interesting thing about this book. It is one of the things that kept me interested, and it's one of the things that I appreciated finding out more about. However, I will definitely say that if you are here for the shadow magic, that you're kind of gonna be left wanting more, because shadow magic, we are kind of introduced to the basics, or we're kind of introduced to half of the basics to some extent, because basically this book is an urban fantasy story set in a world that's kind of a decade or two in our future, and in the meantime shadow magic has been discovered. I think it's kind of like in True Blood, where the vampires at some point came out and said like, hey, we're here, we exist. Within this world, at one point in time, the Gloomists, I think they're called, or Glomists, not entirely sure how to pronounce it, they came forward and said like, hey, shadow magic exists. And so within this world, shadow magic has been uncovered. However, most of the day-to-day public don't really know what shadow magic fully entails. So there are more mysteries surrounding shadow magic than there are known facts. And since we are reading from the perspective of somebody who herself is not a shadow mage, that also means that her understanding of shadow magic and its possibilities, its limitations, is also limited. So to some extent you will get to find out some of the possibilities, but mainly I feel like my interest was constantly just getting piqued, but it wasn't fully satisfied throughout this story. However, there will be a sequel at the very least to this book, and I feel like we will dive into shadow magic further within that one, or I definitely hope we will. But so in this world, basically there is a possibility for your shadow to be quickened, and when that happens, your shadow kind of takes on a life of its own, not fully of its own. The shadow kind of stays under your control. However, it can be sent to do certain things. For example, it can be used to kind of manipulate the feelings or the actions of the people around you. Shadows can be altered. There's also this whole sort of like clandestine business transaction happening with shadows, where people have had their shadows stolen, for example, and those shadows are then later on sold off, for example. Shadows can also be altered. There are quite a lot of elements introduced when it comes to shadow magic, but never a full explanation. For example, there's also an explanation about the different types of shadow mages, but that never fully landed to me, because it's just like introduced in this one chapter or in this one like paragraph of the novel, and then later on from time to time we got references to this terminology, but it's not like I remembered the actual meaning of the terms anymore by that point. Based on some of the reviews that I've been seeing for this book, and especially some of the negative reviews I've been seeing for this book, people went into this book expecting it to be a dark fantasy, and I would say that it definitely has some dark fantasy elements. It definitely leans towards dark fantasy, but in terms of its atmosphere, I mainly compare it to film noir. So basically a bleak, nihilistic world, a world that does not really have hope in it. Basically a world that's just like surviving to some extent. There's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of cynicism within the characters. Most of the characters have some sort of a criminal involvement. Our heroes are actually anti-heroes. All of these elements kind of made me think of film noir, especially then because it is also a mystery detective type plot, which for me is my main problem with this book, because I don't like detectives, and as a result, and partly because of that, I guess I also don't really like film noir all that much. I will therefore also immediately say that my parallel with film noir might not hold up for somebody who likes film noir. I basically cannot really say, hey, if you like Chinatown, then you will love this book, because I didn't like Chinatown. I also didn't like this book, but that doesn't automatically mean that somebody who does like Chinatown will like this book. But so the bleak atmosphere and all those things I can deal with. I kind of enjoyed that sort of like muted dark atmosphere, but it is of course, as I said, quite muted. There isn't a lot of excitement to be had with that type of atmosphere. And because it's then combined with a storyline that doesn't interest me, and a magic system that excites me but never really fully landed. That also meant that basically by the end of it I was like, nah, it was okay, but that's more or less it. When it comes to the storyline, as I said, it's kind of a detective style story. It's not really a detective because she isn't a detective. She's basically trained as a con artist. In this case, she to some extent kind of just stumbles into this case. And at one point in time, she's kind of pushed further into the case by outside influences. But from the beginning, it's not fully clear why she's actually getting involved. And a lot of her choices are kind of explained through this sort of narrative of she's always making bad choices, but that kind of feels a little bit lazy to never then explore why she's making these choices. But so she's basically connecting the dots throughout this story, kind of gathering clues to some extent, you can say, and then combining that to kind of crack the case at the end. As I said, I was never fully interested in the case to begin with, but the one thing that can kind of be seen as like the twist or the reveal at the end is actually something that I predicted halfway through the novel. And I do feel like a lot of people have this problem, because in some of the reviews I've been seeing, I have been hearing people say that there was a particular, that there was a big plot point that they had guessed. So I'm thinking it is quite predictable in that sense, which isn't necessarily a problem in and of itself. If executed well, I don't mind having predicted something. If executed well, it can still feel like an exciting scene, the moment in which that reveal hits. But in this case, it just kind of felt like, yeah, okay, so it was what I expected it to be. So I do think that it didn't really land with any sort of a punch. There is a sort of like second development, or second like reveal, not really reveal, like plot twist, I guess, which takes place at the end of this novel, which I also to some extent predicted at some point. So that happening like very close after the other reveal happening was kind of solidifying my idea that it was quite predictable. The very ending, the sort of like epilogue if you wish, I did not predict that, and I kind of would have liked it to be executed somewhat differently. Basically, without giving any sort of spoilers, we could summarize the ending as, oh shit, but no worries, there's book 2 to deal with this, you know? And I would have loved for us to just end on, oh shit. I don't know if that's clear, because I of course don't want to give any spoilers. But so basically I just would have loved for us to end on that bad note, for us to kind of realize, oh no, something has gone horribly wrong, without then already offering that sort of a hint of, but maybe we can tackle this in book 2. I don't need to be told that maybe we can tackle this in book 2. Maybe that is just because apparently they marketed this as a standalone, and so this is to clearly indicate, no, we are going to give you a second book. But I just wanted that super open ending. I wanted that shock ending of being like, oh, did not see that coming. And I feel like that was kind of cheapened with the last line of this novel. So anything else I need to talk about? Maybe the characters. So I do find that the two main characters, so Charlie and Vince, are very compelling characters. But that's not necessarily due to great character work. I think with one of them, so with Vince, there's that element of mystery. Vince is a very mysterious, enigmatic character, so we don't know much about his past. In the beginning, I kind of get the sense that Charlie was just like vibing with him, more or less. She was content in her relationship, but it didn't really feel as if these were like soulmates who knew each other true and true. There seemed to be quite a lot of things left unsaid, or things that they weren't exploring about each other's pasts. And as a result, he remains this sort of enigmatic character that we want to find out more about. But it's not that we dive into a whole lot when it comes to that character later on. And so I think that this character is mainly compelling because of how little we know about him. And with Charlie, I feel like it's such a mixed bag, because to some extent I loved reading from her perspective. I loved her narrative voice. However, at the same time, it feels like we are told a lot about what she is like. We're told that she's making bad decision after bad decision, whereas we never really explore that. Okay, why are these decisions bad decisions? Why is she making these decisions? And I think the intention was to link this to her past. At some point in time, she was kind of taken under the wing of this con artist and shown his ways. However, I never fully felt on my side that her choices and her intentions and her motivations were really clear to me. So I feel like they were compelling characters, there was a compelling relationship, but again, it wasn't fleshed out, and again, there wasn't real substance to them neither. So on the whole, my conclusion with this book is just that for me, at least, it was a meh. For me, it was a book that I didn't dislike enough to quit, basically. I was listening to it, and I think if I wasn't listening to it, I might have DNF'd it, because if I had had to put more mental energy into finishing it, if I had to put more effort into picking it up, staying focused on it, then perhaps it wouldn't have worked out. Now that I had the ease of, just listening to it, and from time to time maybe having my mind drift, but still being able to follow, if that hadn't been there, I might have DNF'd it, because at no point was I compelled enough to continue. Early on I was, like the first hour maybe even of me listening to the audiobook, I was intrigued because of that introduction to the shadow magic system and things like that. But it did definitely lose me once we were focusing more on these sort of like detective type storylines. So I think that this book could work for you if you enjoy detective style storylines a lot more. If you enjoy those in combination with fantasy, for example, and if you are, for example, a fan of film noir. But so yeah, those are my concluding thoughts about The Book of Night by Holly Black. Definitely let me know if you've read this book. It is definitely a type of book in which I'm intrigued to find out people's opinion. I know that they're pretty bad. I know that most reviews are negative for this book, but there definitely are also people out there for who this book really works, and I would be more than happy to hear from them as well. But so yeah, with that, I'm gonna end this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you guys for the next one. Bye!